Hi, Dave Burns here with this week's video diary. This week is a behind the scenes look at the Marshall chipped Shabby Road sessions. Hi, Dave here.
Peter here. Michael here.
And we are in Shabby Road Studios filming the latest edition of my video diary. And this week we're going to have a look at the mixing process that we use when we film our live sessions. You might remember a couple of weeks ago we did a behind the scenes vlog for our first Shabby Road session, looking at setting everything up, sound checking some of the equipment that we use. This week we're going to have a look at the mixing process, which means, Michael, over to you.
Hello, I do the mixing. I'm Michael. So yeah, how we basically do this, I'll try not to rant. If I go too ranty, just tell me that.
I will tell you.
So basically, we split this. We do this live, right? So we split the signal in half. With the studio computer, it has 8 channels. It does all the drums. And then David's also
my computer. I've got the same setup basically.
Exact
Another
same
M track 8. So
yeah, and in that
set that up.
Drums being the most important thing in the whole band by a long shot.
Well, except that there's
spoken by a drummer. Yeah.
There's 2 bass tracks, so quite clearly I'm the superior. Like the bass is to the best.
I've got 2 guitar tracks.
That's true.
Well, so he has 2 amps. So it's guitar, bass DI, bass amp, and then auxiliary 1 from the live desk has his vocals, and auxiliary 2, because the desk only has 2 auxiliary sends, has a combination of R2 backing vocals, usually with him slightly louder because he does more, and also because I do the higher ones and they're slightly louder, so I want it slightly lower.
We record all that, get it into the computer, get it imported from my computer into your computer, and then sync it all up, and then we have what is on the screen in front of us.
Yeah, and the syncing up takes a little bit longer than you'd expect because the computer, the studio computer and Dave's computer doesn't have the same internal clock. So where it's putting its bits is slightly off. So you've got to basically sync up every song, which is fine. And also because if the song is slightly long, they can sometimes trail off. But it's only it's never by more than 0.10 of a second. So actually, when it does it, for certain songs it kind of suits it because you get this kind of delay effect on mostly the drums, which is totally cool.
Ideally we would have an recording input that has more than 8 channels on it.
But we're not.
But we've looked that up, and they cost like $2,000 for the interface, and then another $2,000 for.
They cost what is known as outside of our budget, which is most things.
This is Shabby Road, so we'll do it as on the cheap as we can.
Oh yeah, and I'm pretty pleased with it. I like the results. So we've been working with such cheap stuff for so long. I'm pretty much used to it. It's my norm now. Like I don't even.
Well, it gives you a unique sound if anything.
It does give you also quite a unique sound because you've got to constantly look for like little shortcuts and stuff like that.
And we will come on to one of your little magic tricks later. You have a very special way of setting up hall reverb.
Yeah. So like, I'll just go through some of these tracks. So yeah, obviously the standard drum configuration, I think so anyway. Like kick, snare, the 3 toms, 2 overheads, and a room. The room, I change what the room is every time we do a recording. Other than actually since this, I was so happy with this drum sound that like I have just left. I've been doing a lot of drum recording with Jenny. I have just left that room. The mic is a Sontronic. It's like a sort of ribbon mic, a pencil sort of condenser. Like I can't remember the specs, but the sound of it is basically got so much high-end frequencies that it doesn't really work. I've got a stereo pair. I don't use it as this is what I bought it for. I bought it to be a stereo pair over the drums, but it's not got enough bottom end. So when we got the second Fatboy mic, that's just a Rode, I think NT1A. They do the overhead sound. They do the bulk of the sound.
So crisp.
They do a lot of heavy lifting with the sound, and then I have that other one slightly distant and behind the drummer, and it's just a good sound. Like
it's got a nice bit of air to it.
It's just got it just adds more of that like your ear is never right next to a snare, like so it's
yours are.
Hence why I can't hear it this year. But
the doctor said it was a wax problem.
Yeah, that's true. The drum setup has changed a lot. I remember what was the drum setup we used to use in the very start? Was it just literally one overhead, 2 overheads?
When we first had the Shabby Road Studio, we didn't have the 8-channel. We had instead, I had a 2-channel interface and Jenny had a 4-channel interface. We didn't have the studio computer. We had 2 laptops, and what we basically had to do was do a submix on the desk, the live desk for there, and it was basically just kick and snare. We didn't have tom mics yet. Overhead 1, overhead 2. All of that was coming in on auxiliary 1, and then.
So, needless to say, it sounded a wee bit small.
There's a lot of room to tweak
Not
that.
a lot of room.
I've done sessions before where I've been
Oh, yeah.
recording drums as well, where I've just been working with a kick and 2 overheads.
Oh
and
yeah,
that's been it.
you can get a good sound out of that. I actually don't. I mean, obviously, Demo 1 has got kind of a shit sound to it, but it's still, for what it is pretty good. Like, Channel 1 was all drums, like in mono, sadly, because I had to take an auxiliary, so it was mono drums, and then Channel 2 was bass, and then on channels 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the Jenny laptop, you had guitar 1, guitar 2. My vocals got its own channel when we did Demo 1. I remember I had 2 mics.
Sure.
I had one mic that was going into the desk for the sound, and the other one was this. It was a poor choice of mic, but it was a really cheap Behringer condenser that was getting my voice, because we didn't do an awful lot of backing vocals in
No, not at all.
but the little backing vocals we did do was coming in through the desk again in auxiliary send 2 from the desk into channel 4 on the thing. It's f***ed up, I still remember that, but it was such a faff to do. Like,
Yeah, so now you've got the luxury of having 8 channels just for the drums. So let's get a little
give
bit
that a wee
queued
look,
up and let's
Yeah.
hear what you got.
so this is the kick.
That is
So-
a kick.
So that's a kick. First thing you might notice is that, like, I don't use gates. I'm so sorry. That's very unprofessional. Anyway, the first thing you'll notice is that I don't use noise gates. I did used to use noise gates, but I actually I'm such a Steve Albini.
I like a bit of spill.
I like spill. I actually
the lead stuff is good.
Yeah, I think it adds to the sound. So all that, especially when you do it live like this, where like you can hear David. Like,
Yeah, when everybody's in the room.
and those frequencies, that's not the sound of the vocals, but it does contribute to the body of his voice, like, and the bass as well. A little bit of the guitar, but not actually that much. But it's getting that low end room sound. So I don't use gates on that at all. The other thing that's weird about how I mix the kick and the snare specifically is, this is really uncommon. I mean, I have a compressor and an EQ. That's really common. But I also run the kick and the snare through an amp simulator.
There are a few folk that do
There's
stuff like
probably
that.
people-
When
yeah.
I was mixing the very first Marshall chipped album that we did with
Yeah.
Pete on drums, when we did Time and Distance, I did something similar where I put the kick through a distortion effect.
I do
to
vaguely
give it
remember that.
a bit more body.
It's kind of, I think
Because the kick was a bit
theory,
weak. Right?
the theory is basically because when we recorded stuff in the 70s, you know, the golden era, like, you had everything was running through a built-in desk that had its own preamps. So pumping up the gain didn't give you that hideous digital distortion. It just gave you a warm kind of like
Like a fuzz, right?
this is specifically designed to emulate valve amp style.
It just fattens it up a
It
bit.
just fattens it up, and it's almost like that scoop sort of EQ thing, but it does it without actually. Like, I could maybe try and emulate that with just EQ, but it wouldn't really get the same effect because there is an element of drive to it. So I put that. I leave it all exactly the way it comes. Like, I don't even. Sometimes I will like boost the bass a little bit, but very rarely. It's mostly just the sound of adding this emissary ignite amps onto it. I do sort of, the snare is even weirder actually, because I do it with the snare, and then I turn it off, and I'll explain that a little bit later. This is the snare sounds. That's just a classic SM57 snare sound. It's just great. It needs so little work. A little bit of EQ, like a little tiny bit of EQ, a little bit of compression. That's it. Toms have even less, I think. Toms just have EQ. I don't compress the toms because I feel the close mic of the toms, you want it to be almost out of control, dynamically boomy. Like,
I'm picking up the snare
like,
sounds.
yeah, like the flattish sort of sound of the toms, or like the compressed sound of the toms. I get from the overheads anyway. So like the toms, if I can just find you because I've shrunk down this. I just think they sound massive. Like, I think the toms are actually getting sent through a fake
toms sounded
lever.
great.
See what I mean?
That's a big sound.
It's just big and boomy, and it's out of control, and I love it. And it's again barely EQ'd. All the 3 toms have the same, like, just rough EQs. Sometimes I have to change the floor toms EQ just because occasionally I put the mic in a place that gets it too boomy, but this wasn't the case. They've actually all.
See if you can get the bit where it's in We've Always Been at War, where there's a big tom bit. Here it comes.
You do the guitar solo bit all at the toms, don't you?
Oh yeah.
So how does that sound when you combine it with the overheads?
So with the overheads, like, oh, I've got to say this, right? Tom 2, this is a bit weird. Tom 2 is the only close mic on the whole drum kit that has fake reverb on it, which you can sort of hear, like,
Okay, so what's that about?
So the reason I used to just put the fake reverb on the snare, but it washed out the snare too much. But because I'm not using gates, any close mic I put reverb on, fake reverb specifically, is gonna have all of it on it.
Right.
And so I think it was through experimenting. I might have been drinking at the time, but like with the last Marshall chip thing, I was like, I'm sick of it sounding shit when I put it on the snare. So I'd put it on Tom 1 and it also didn't work because he plays Tom 1 and the floor tom a lot. So like it being that pounding there, it was too much. And so it's just magically Tom 2 because you don't play it anywhere near as much.
Yeah, well, because they removed it at half the venues we play.
Yeah, most of the fake reverb is actually, it's like background almost. It's like close but distant miking, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Ultimately, the real reason is it just sounds good. Like, the theory might not make sense. It doesn't actually always have to make sense. I experimented with this weird and it worked.
But that's the thing, you know, if you're playing around with sounds, the ultimate arbiter are your ears.
Is it? Yeah, it doesn't sound good. Yeah, it doesn't matter, and nothing else matters. The overheads, in this case, I f***ed up with the overheads. I got phasing. I've actually had phasing the last 2 times I recorded. Like, where you put the overheads means that the wave format cancels itself out and gives you a really thin sound. So you flip the phase. That's just a little bit of trivia.
Yeah, I have to do the same with 2 guitar amps.
Sometimes you get away with it. I think we got. I don't know. Did you put that on phase before you sent that to me?
Yeah, I always check the guitar sound in the room, and then the phase signal is on the pedal board.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah. So yeah, that's that. The overheads, I think they just literally have. They just have compression. They don't even. I used to EQ the overheads by boosting the high end because they're doing a lot of the cymbals work, right? But I often found that makes the cymbals unbearably tinny. Like,
yeah, so they can get quite shrill if you put too much.
Yeah, and like so, it's more just making sure they're set up in a good position that's not crazy far away and not crazy close. And so yeah, like it's like a lot of the philosophy of doing this is in the recording process. Like it should sound good then, and then you're just tweaking wee bits as opposed to, oh, it sounds like shit, but who cares? I'll just fucking mix it to sound better.
Get it sounding good in
at the
room
time.
rather
Yeah.
than, oh, I'll fix it in post.
So yeah, just the overheads alone actually could have been the drum sound. Like they've not got as much bottom end. They're more controlled because of the compression. That's such a good sound, you know, like.
And as I say, if you put the kick in as well.
Oh yeah.
I've done recordings where that is the drum sound, just the kick is overhead. Not even adding the snare.
Yeah, you could probably get away with it quite easily.
Yeah, if I had only 3 mics, I would do it that way as well. But like,
so if we put the whole thing together for the drum sound.
Oh, I should also show you the room.
We'll get the room mic as well.
This is that one. This is the new one. And again, this on its own isn't going to sound great. This is filling out a sound that's not there. This is also only got compression.
It's not very high in the mix. This one, is it?
But already you can hear just how much more sensitivity there is in the high end. It's kind of like in there all the time. Like, I actually that's the best sound I've ever got. That's why I've just been doing it. Like, and that's just behind him. It's because I found someone told me this mental recording technique when I was in college. It was for acoustic guitar, but I've since appropriated it for loads of shit, where you just put the 2 condensers at a person's ears. Because that's how they're hearing the acoustic guitar.
Like auto audio.
Yeah. Like, so that I've found that not to be as good with acoustic, but like, there's reasons for it with the drums. You know what I mean? You're more.
Yeah, sure, right.
So also because the drums are loud. That's the only reason you can get away with it. So anyway, this all together, the drums is doing. Is this including the verb? I should talk about this reverb. So like,
yes, your Magic Hall reverb. Now this is not. if you're familiar with mixing, you'll be well aware of using plugins to get sounds. If you're using guitar, you've got a reverb tank in the amp. You would turn that up, or you might use a reverb pedal. We're not using pedals. We're not using tanks. We're using hall reverb, but we're using an actual hall.
It's literally a hall or corridor or hall. It's somewhere in between the two, and basically it's literally that old school Beatles thing of like, open the door, put a condenser mic into the hall, blast it from the speakers. That's the reverb sound.
Blast from the speakers. Hope the neighbours don't.
Again, this does
usually done late at night when everyone else has gone.
Oh yeah, because everyone I got lucky as well. I managed to do it the second time I was doing the video. Everyone had gone. I was like, yes. So I've started doing this on everything. When did I start doing this? With the V&D album, maybe?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Like that,
and I just do it on everything now, man. And it does sound bad on its own, but you do not put this
You're
on
not
its own.
meant to hear this on its own, but now let's hear it on its own.
On its own.
It's kind of cool. That's a sort of, whatchamacallit, sort of Eurythmics-y kind of sound to it.
And it's one of those things that like you're like, God, that sounds so awful. Why would you put that in? Let me show you what it does when it's not there. Right, so this is all the drums, right? That's it without, and then this is it with.
It's that magic secret ingredient that just
It's just, and that's like,
it's like
the
making
key
a curry without spice, and you add it in, boom.
That's the key to a lot of mixing. It's like it doesn't matter what something sounds when you've soloed it. It just depends on how good it works in a mix. I actually forgot how good that sounded, like even just there, because just assume it's going to be good, and then you're like, what if when we're filming and I do this and it doesn't sound good?
Like the sound has absolutely gotten a lot better since we've been in here.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is to do with getting better equipment, but a lot of it is to do with
it's just everything. It's trial and error. It's like
learning how to use it.
We've basically been doing this a lot, and then it's the equipment getting better. The equipment, it's like you got to be strategic with equipment because like you can, the gap for money spending goes like this. We are like here, right? Yeah. But there's a lot of key purchases you can do that make things massively better. Like getting a second, Rode. That was a massive. That jump. I can still hear that. That's between like Demo 4 and like the Midnight Force album. The difference is massive on the drums.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that pedal show and Josh Scott at JHS talk about a lot. You can get 90% of the way there.
Oh yeah.
With reasonably basic equipment.
Yeah, but then
not the massively expensive stuff. Then it's just diminishing returns.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
On the big money stuff.
I know what I would
you can get fantastic sounds out of the massively expensive stuff, but the budget's going to increase exponentially.
Yeah, so like I know, like I have like a short list of things that I would get when I'm next not broke as hell.
Yeah.
That I know would drastically improve the quality of what we put out, right? Versus like, we could spend $2,000 on one Neumann. It would make a difference. It's just that there's so many other things we could make a difference in. So like that's basically why we got there.
Anyway, as well because the things evolved. Like I mean, like the first recordings we were doing were the V&D and Midnight Force ones, and they're quite different. And then Chipped has changed quite a bit over time in sound, so it's
it's evolved quite a bit.
It's also good. It's good because they're kind of different challenges in different ways. Like they're sort of. And Pyre's a different thing as well.
And there's Pyre as well, and soon we'll be doing some more folk stuff as well.
Because there's very little like blown out distorted guitar. So like, what do you do? It's changed how I play bass as well, so it's good. Speaking of the bass, this is the bass mic. As two bass
signals tracked as well.
And I use they're different this time around. When we did the first Marshall Chip thing, the first live one of these, right? I basically took out the DI from the mix, apart from where I played distorted bass. Because the bass mic from the amp does most of the sound really well, but it doesn't record distorted bass very well. So whenever I was hitting distortion, I'd trim the DI signal to just that portion and distort it in box, because I've actually got quite good. Like I quite like mixing in bass in box. Like it's not like guitar. Guitars, I wouldn't even.
Guitar is massively colored by the sound of the amp.
Yeah, like, massively. It's basically a character. Like. Whereas bass, not so much. So yeah, this is different. This time the DI's in it all the time, but lower and mostly just for the
and the
slap bass.
And the DI is before all your effects, isn't it?
It's before all the effects as well. Like
so, it's taking a clean signal all the time.
Clean signal. So like sometimes this track has, this session has me using some of the other effects. Like the second song, what is the going on?
We have always been at war.
We have always been.
It's one of the new ones, so we
It's
have.
one of the new ones, so like
we
that's
don't
what I remember
what it's called.
quite.
it has a very weird bass tone. It sounds like this.
Yeah, it's kind of like disco-y.
It's a bit, yeah.
So
It's an octave.
that's just the octaver, like, but it's normally like it's because I play bass with the tone all the way off. Like if that was done with a normal bass, like with how you play, like where everything's all the way up,
Yeah.
it just wouldn't sound the same. It would
Crappy
sound
punk, as I
wobbly.
call it.
Yeah. Whereas I'm wanting that wobbliness because it suits the song. Like the DI doesn't have that though, so the DI sounds like basically.
That just sounds like when you're playing a bass and you're bowing on a headphone.
Yeah.
But what happens when you blend the two?
When you blend the two,
Here's what I made earlier.
So you've got the kind of seasicky effects, but with the clean cutting through as well.
yeah, the clean cuts in, especially with the low end, because it's like I think on the DI I've also got a limiter, so I've got like the pretty strong compressor and a limiter, so that it's really tight. It's really tight in the low end, especially, right? And this also is limited as well, but it's not got the emissary. But like, so it's I do compress a lot of the bass. It has to be said, but I don't do that because I'm sloppy with dynamics. Like I do it because I know
You are sloppy.
I'm really not actually, but it's more. Doing that. That's me doing it as a mixer rather than a bassist, because the bottom has so much out of control energy when we master this here as well. Like in the mastering stage, it's just easier when the bass is really controlled, like tightly controlled dynamically at the low end. That way you can make it really loud. This is much louder than the last one, and it's not got an inch of distortion. So like that.
But the bass mix, the mastering done by a bass player.
Oh yeah. Well, it's all about the low end. If anyone tells you any differently, they're full of shit. Like so
it's anchoring the whole session. So
it does, and also it's like Marshall Chip's fun because like he has a really jangly guitar tone, and so to counter that, I have a very low bass tone, right? And we fill out a lot of the dynamics in a good way. The dynamics, the frequencies out, because your guitar is doing a lot of the like I'd say mid to high.
And there's a few songs where I'm using octave pedals to add an octave
to add
above
even
as well.
more shit, and also with the shimmer as well, that's also really high. So like you're doing a lot of that high end. Your voice is like low to
Way
mid.
down here.
Yeah, I'm playing in the subs because I've rolled off all the tone, and our voices do the high and mid. So like it's a good fill.
There's
It's just
a
cool.
lot of frequencies covered.
It's a lot of shit covered. So like that's the bass. Now the guitar. This is where things get a little bit mental.
So what have we got first of all? This is the dry.
This is the Fender.
This is the Fender sounds. So
It's crispy. They're actually fun because the tones are actually so different, but it's in ways that I think a lot of people would struggle to describe. This is the Vox. Oh, in this case, that's very different. That's basically clean to rasp. But
Yeah,
the two of them combined is phenomenal. Like
the guitars in the song is cleaning the verses, and then I'm putting the rat in the choruses. And for this one, the ABY splitter for all the songs is after the gain stages. So whichever distortion pedals I put on are going to both the dry and the wet.
I didn't know that.
It's only the modulation and delay and reverb that are going to the Vox.
That's mental.
The gain stages are going to both.
That means that the really different sort of tone is just purely the amp, which is mental considering how different that is. If they're
So that's the Fender.
that's so different. Like that's so scratchy compared to that. Like, and they've got the same amount of gain. That's insane.
They're getting the same amount of gain from the pedals. I think they're set up very slightly differently at the amps.
That's so crazy.
They're both kind of almost edge of breakup, but I think the Fender was slightly more towards that. There's a little bit more headroom in the Vox because it's got to handle all the modulation effects later on. This is the Rat. I love the Rat sound.
So in your face. So usually, this is a funny thing, right? So usually with guitar amps, I don't do anything. I don't compress them. I don't EQ them.
No.
There's just the sound that we get there. That's why I usually spend so fucking long being like, like moving the mic like a millimeter. A millimeter would make a massive difference on a guitar. Honest to God, millimeter, more than even the drums. In fact, significantly more than even the drums. Like there's so like you.
Yeah, where you put it on the cone is a massive effect on the tone.
The angle, everything, all this like little bits like this makes a massive difference. So like if I've not got that right, then do it again. Like try and change it. So like I very rarely do anything. This is different though because I kind of up. Like I had this one was lacking like the sort of 3K a bit, like where your ears hear the most, just on the wet. That's my bad.
You can just push it up a little bit.
So that's just
a little tweak.
That's a tiny tweak. I think also this time there is a compressor and another little boost in the high. The compressor, what have I got? Yeah, I've got. It's like just a solidish compressor, just because the dynamics for this session were a bit more crazy than normal. But
and that's on the Fender, the dry amp.
That's so no, that's on. So this is the stereo. I've started using grouping.
Oh, right.
Everything.
So this is on both.
So on both as a stereo, they're both getting the exact same amount of compression, just so that they're both like thingy. Also, you'll notice the leveling is different. Like the wet one is so much quieter. It's actually plus, and this is -6 dB. Like that's not normal. That was just that specific session. Though usually they're usually absolutely level.
Yeah, I tried to leave you quite a bit of headroom in the box, knowing
so
that's where the effects were.
That's slightly different. I think that's really it. Anyway,
so let's hear a little bit of the guitars together again.
Yes. So this is the Rat.
Let's put it onto a song that uses a lot of modulation.
Yeah.
If you go to the next one, sorry, one after that one, second last one. If you go to just the Fender, so that is just the gain stages. I think that's just the blues breaker pedal on there. If you bring take the Fender out and then the box in, that's getting the chorus and flanger as well on top of the gain stages.
It's just cool. It just adds to. It's also just because it's now in stereo. Even the little differences, it's. You could describe it as like super mono. Is that what it's called?
Do you take one of the whole amps off when you're doing just the start of that verse, like the?
No,
it kind of drops a bit there. Like,
it's just that's
it's just the difference between the two of them.
Just how much of it
you can hear, like just a little bit off.
You take off.
So the wobble is only on the Vox.
The cool thing it does is
that's panned right, isn't it?
The Vox is all the way right. Is all the way right? Yeah. Have to be like. And then the other one is the Fender's all the way right.
So you've got that constant. It's really apparent on songs where I'm using the tremolo.
Yeah, it's also just
you
cool.
Get that constant dry sound with the effects sounds playing against it.
I think you hear it most when in stuff like this where it's trailing out. Like it's more. That's when it's most obvious to me. But like I don't know.
It's cool, I think.
But I love it. I think it's fucking sweet. It's such a. Especially it was more in the last session when we were doing
with the delays.
Yeah, that was epic. That was so cool.
I heard everything disappear.
Yeah. Even the start of that is cool. So like, yeah, that's. I think I've got chorus in this as well.
Oh yeah, chorus bass on here too.
And it's
all the modulation.
Quality, man. So, last but not least, vocals. David. So it's basically, like I said, David has his own channel because he's lead, and he's on all of it. Also, even if he wasn't lead, I would try and figure a different way. His voice is so different to mine and Pete's in every conceivable way.
It's almost like you're related.
Well, yeah, but also you're a very different singer. Like you've got
first I've heard of it.
There's so much, like. There's so much. I don't want to say power because it's a bit gimpy, but there is so much like low end frequency. Like
yeah, I'm definitely singing a lot. I've got a much deeper voice and sing a lot lower than most vocalists are.
But also, there's just a lot of like, even if you're singing slightly high, it's still got all this like low resonance battering through. So like you couldn't. I can't compress as the same way. Like I can't even EQ as the same way.
No,
I also have to EQ you different to every other singer because like
It's
usually
got to be different, haven't it?
you have to be.
Has a slight advantage. His extra lung capacity is more probably than both of my lungs.
I think it's got something to do with that. You might be jest, but
Definitely. If you're a big guy, you're 6'4".
yeah, like
There's a large resonant chamber in there.
Oh yeah, so I think it's just that. It also means that usually when you EQ a singer, you get rid of a lot of the low end, but a lot of the low end is a lot.
That is where my voice is.
Is where he's at. So you kind of just got.
I don't know if my voice would ever break. Honestly, I didn't know until I was about 17 or something.
We can afford to be on the same channel because our voice is so similar, like that it doesn't really. It's not. There's no compression.
Ours is more funny because we have very different singing styles, which is what more makes it interesting.
Yeah,
they blend together really nicely.
So yeah,
the backing vocals in this whole session weren't probably the best for the showcasey ones because they were a bit sort of like last minute. But the main vocals I think sounded really good on this one.
So yeah. So on the backing vocals, I'll just say the EQ. People don't realize this. Like there was a post from Becky Wallace. She was like, I'm mixing and I want to make something sound more backing vocalsy, and every one of the comments is add more reverb. I'm like, no, take away the high end. Like, how can you not? How did no one else put that up? You take away the high end,
and it just sits
in the back. The frequency will all still be there, but it won't be in front of you. It's like basic though, right? Because
it's the same as the way the Memory Man works, where the delays sit in a lot nicer because it's taking away high end.
Or even more basic. If you're in the toilet of a club, everything's like. It's in the background, because there's no high end. High end is
what kind of backing vocal sound you're going for. Like I like my backing vocals to be quite in your face because I like that kind of style.
If it's
that's what you're going for.
If it's V and D, because we do a lot of stuff where like there isn't really a backing vocal, like it's just us doing two leads.
You want like Alice Cooper style, where the backing vocals are actually louder than his main one.
But that's an interesting case because they are louder, but they are also mixed in the same way where the high end is.
So they do also do that. Because I know what you mean now. They are definitely in the background.
Here, right. Listen to this. Right, I'll take out David. Right, because with him you do the opposite. With him, you boost.
You've got to put the treble in because there's none in my voice.
Well, yeah. Also, but there is. It's just that it's like it's not as present. It's nowhere near as present as all the low backing frequencies. So like,
so I have to bring him forward.
But they are there. I do have to bring him forward quite dramatically, but they are there. It's just that you want them there, and you want them there because it actually works well with your voice. There is like a lot of little bits in there, and there is little detail, and it's nice. But yeah, no, listen to the backing vocal on its own. It's like. It's mostly here. If I put all that back in,
it's quite harsh.
It's quite harsh, but also it's now in the foreground. It's now not really a backing vocal, like whereas like it's the opposite with David. He's here with a.
Little victories come my way tonight.
See how much low end, and I've still taken low end off here. It's still just. I've not taken the whole. Usually I would smooth the whole thing out, even if it was me and him. But like I don't want to do that because actually it's part of your appeal of your voice is that it's so smooth.
It's what I sound like.
I still look how much of that is going, like, and it's still like.
Little victories come my way tonight.
So that's what the front of house vocal should sound like with the backing on the back.
Little victories come my way tonight.
You see what I mean? It sounds
because you've
like
got
it's
the higher frequencies in your
voice. What's the end
bit
bit sound like? Where all did the woes? That'll be good.
Yeah. So I mean, there is actually both of us in there, but it's like
it's mainly you.
It's mostly you.
Yeah.
Like, and I kind of maybe that up a little bit, but like.
I didn't do that best.
See, like, so the frequency is all there. You can still definitely hear you. It's just not like.
That was my best singing performance, by the way. I usually do better than that. Just
it's live. Like that's the worst bit when you solo vocals in a live performance. You're like,
you would never do that.
You would never. Yeah, you wouldn't. But that's the thing. That also partly why I like doing live stuff because like.
Oh, that's like when they really meanly do that to the backing dancers in pop bands and all you can hear them going.
Oh, that's
like all the time. You're like, well, to be fair, they are doing the dances and stuff.
Oh yeah. Like that's the good thing about doing it live though, because it means that like you're not you know this, like when you're doing like an album, you overthink the vocals, like you overthink the performance.
Yeah, sure.
You're like, oh god, I need to do it again because I could definitely do it better. Whereas like live, it's
This
a
is
live
just
thing.
you just go into the
That's
room,
where it was.
you play,
That's good.
whatever happens.
And they don't need to sound good on their own because they're not getting heard on their own. This isn't an acoustic thing. Like it's got, and also it's all. If you solo it, it's a bit weird, but. Because that's where everyone should sit. You know, it's not all. But that's the fake reverb. The fake reverb is doing, I think, mostly the vocals and the tom too. So yeah, it's basically this new thing that I've got called the Valhalla Supermassive. I've used this for really intimate acoustic-y performances. I've used it now for every Marshall chipped sort of thing we've done live. Any kind of time I'm putting reverb on, basically anything, doesn't matter what it's for, or delay, because it's both. If you with the warp and the density, it's just delay, and you change like this. It has all these different options. They're all f***ing sweet. They're all. I just like the Great Annihilator as a reverb thing. It's just good.
That's what delay is. It's just
It's
a
just
reverb.
yeah, where the repeats are too far apart. Like
Some of the best reverb sounds I've heard have been from people messing around with delay pedals.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I've seen a few of them as well.
And
And this
this-
like vocalists with vocal delay pedals and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Similar to the backing vocals, get rid of a lot of the high end. I have heard from people that with reverb you would get rid of the high end and the low end. I don't really feel that way about it, but like I can see that the theory is that you're adding, it's like an extension of the note basically, and that would be, you don't want it to distract. But I don't know. I've experimented with getting rid of the low end in the reverb and it's not good. Definitely get rid of it in the high end, because even this plugin, even as good as it is, there's still a distracting kind of like with how it puts itself on certain like things that are done. Even vocals, which is pretty easy, but it's too distracting in the mix. That is too distracting for me. I don't know. Like that's a kind of new thing though. I didn't used to do that as well because I wasn't using routing, because I never thought I'd ever need to use routing. But now I'm routing daft. Tamsin showed me that, and I'm just that and
Going
grouping.
for it in a big way now.
Oh, everything. Like your guitars are even in a group. Look.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, look at that.
I mean, it's
simple. Drums, the bass. I was going to make one for the bass, but I never bothered. I could have done it with the vocals.
Yeah, it looks nice.
It works particularly well with something like the drums, where you, as I say, you've got 8 channels of audio all
Yeah.
in making up one instrument.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
you don't have to, like,
when you
control
shrink it
for every
down
single one.
to make the drums look like that, it is kind of, there's not much to it. It's simple and it's like to
It's
the
almost like it
point.
looks just like how we play it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
there's no extra faff. It's just like,
Well, like you said,
And this
the
is
live
how
ones,
we
we didn't
go-
add
This is how we go
language.
into our recording sessions,
Yeah.
isn't it? You know, we start off with recording the 3 of us in a room together live,
Aye.
and then add things on top of that
for albums,
for an
yeah.
album. Yeah.
I like doing it that way.
So we always have this foundation of
Yeah.
where
Aye.
the live track has to sound good.
Yeah, we have
It
to.
goes
sound
like- 'cause
good.
we always want to
But
play
that's,
live as
that's
well,
how
so we can't make the
that's
songs
how I'd
too-
say anyone do
Yeah.
anything. Make sure that is really tight. Pre-production is everything. Like get everything really tight so that you're not ever going, oh, what do we want this to?
You need to make
Yeah.
decisions
You
when
know
you're
that.
actually.
That's what
Rehearse,
practice
have
is
that
for,
all
yeah.
down before you go into record.
Yeah, and then that's what I wish I could convince Jenny does really want it separate, but like it would be good if V&D would even do albums where like we do. I see why not, but like I honestly just think it sounds better. Like, and it's partly because then you've got almost everything doubled. Like if we were to take this and this was to become an album, like and I re-recorded the bass separately. There's always in the background, because of the bleed, another bass that I've played basically the same. So there's almost like a double-tracked bass, quadruple-tracked guitars. It's just good. Sometimes it can sound over complicated, but most of the time it's just fine. So yeah,
Look at
I like it. I just love doing live stuff. I think it's great.
It's good fun.
It's just the next step is to make the place look a bit prettier. Hopefully I can get that done for the next one, but I f***ing doubt it. I am so poor.
So if anyone wants to go to patreon.com/David Burns and give us money, that would be very
Oh, hell
very much
yeah.
appreciated.
I'm not going to knock it now.
So yeah, I think that's about it for this video. That's a little bit on the processes that we use when we're mixing audio.
Method to the madness.
The whole thing will be edited and going up sometime soon. This vlog should go up this Friday, and then I think the first week in November we should have episode 2 of the Shabby Road Sessions going up. We watched the video of it just before we did this video, and it's looking pretty good.
Looking pretty damn
It's
good.
the most pleased I've been with something. But I want to say that every single time we do something.
Yeah,
But that's
always-
the way.
always
Like,
good.
yeah, you don't want to be like.
Yeah, always getting better than that.
I kind of felt a bit gutted when we did the first one of these new live sessions. I was like, should have turned the lights off. What a fucking rookie mistake. Like, it's just because I haven't done one in a while, so I was like, I don't want it to be where it's like it looked better before. Whereas this one is like, yeah.
So you're going to see the evolution of them overall.
Oh, yeah,
all
yeah.
5. I think it's 5 episodes we're planning.
Should be good.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah,
sound
it's-
certainly changed a bit as well.
I just like it. I think it's good, man.
Alright.
And like this is bigger. This is a much bigger sound.
So if anyone's got any questions on what we've been talking about today, please leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell icon so you get notifications. Go to patreon.com/David Burns, sign up, and subscribe there. Thank you very, very much to everyone who has. It's helping pay for all this equipment that we're using in these sessions and foods whilst we can't gig or busk, whilst things are still kind of a bit worrying pandemic wise. Hopefully that we will get back to gigs before too long.
If anyone wants to send me personally food, I only accept fresh steak mignons. Actually, I have no idea what a mignon even is, so I'm going to take that back.
Real word.
Mignon. I think it's a word. Anyway, so
He only has steak minions.
steak
Those
minions.
little
Minions.
yellow things from Despicable Me.
Oh, I'm taking that, man. Good shape for it, to be fair. Like.
It looked like a off potato.
So anyway, on that pop cultural reference, like
We will see you next time.
Tatty bye.
see you after.